is our romance comics panel. And if you don't know by now, because I've moderated so many, I'm Stephanie Guest, aka Saka Sketches. And why don't we just do a round of introductions going down the line?
I'm Autumn. I live in Winnipeg. I'm a local artist, and I love romance comics.
I'm Don Sparrow. I'm from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and I also love romance comics.
Perfect.
I'm Kathleen Gros. I'm in from Vancouver, and I also love romance comics.
There we go. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
there we go. Okay.
Now you got the
because
juice.
now everyone can just hear me even louder because that's what we all want.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can start with what's everyone's favorite romance comic they've read in the last,
Oh my
I'm not
gosh.
going to say in the last year, in the last like couple years, vibes. And it doesn't have to be comic, whatever. I let's break the ice. I'll start. I
gosh.
really loved Bloom
Ooh,
by
yes.
I forget his last name.
And Savannah, no, Paulina Gana
Yep,
show?
that's it. Yeah, with a P. Yeah.
The other sisters, the
Yes.
two.
That one's really lovely. And then
Yeah.
also, I'll always take an opportunity, Kathleen, to shout out your I Hated You in High School. It's so good. It was legitimately one of my favorites. Maybe Kathleen, what was one of your favorites?
I recently read and really enjoyed, she's also a Vancouver-based cartoonist, Emily Gossman. She has a comic called My Love in Stitches that has been running as a webcomic and then was also published by small press Cloudscape Comics, but it's set in an alternate Vancouver called Vancouver, where everyone's a monster, and it's about a Frankenstein girl falling in love with a slime girl, and also because it's Vancouver where housing is a big issue, it's also about predatory housing situations. So it's really, really cute, and I just love it. Yeah.
Awesome. Don, how about you?
I read this stuff all the time, and I tend to read bad romance comics, like old 50s. I love.
I love those.
Young Brides is a
Yeah.
favorite because it's the weirdest problems in the world for a teenager comic. But for an actual one I'd recommend that is good is Blankets. I mean, I know it's very famous and everything, but I also love that it's not to spoil it, but it's not a happy ending necessarily. So it's a romance that is very personal and very real world, but also very well observed.
I wish I had thought harder about the names of stuff I like, because I feel like I go through phases where I read so much it all blurs together. I usually am on the lookout for like romance comics like BL manga and stuff like that. So there's a lot that I really like that have been so delightful, and I can't remember the names exactly. But I'm trying to get back into reading, so I brought out my copy of Northanger Abbey, which is a Jane Austen, one of her less popular, but still one of my favorites, because it's about like a teenager who's so into gothic novels that she like becomes kind of nuts. and she's like everything is a gothic novel around me, and the main character, who is her love interest, is like, it's pretty chill that you also like those, because I like those too, instead of making fun of her. It's not one of her more popular novels, I would say, but it's my favorite if you ever want to read a fun little turn of the century romance novel by Jane Austen that isn't just Pride and Prejudice.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
It's so good. The movie is good too.
Amazing. So I think obviously all of us have dabbled in writing romance comics, and I know, or at least I'm sure we have all felt at some point that romance comics just get a bad rep. So I'm wondering, in your writing process, does that come into your mind, and how do you either subvert that or not let that affect your work and try to, bring it in so that it's still true to yourself and not worry about those outside pressures? Because I think a lot of that might affect romance comics a lot more than maybe other genres.
I guess I don't really think about it anymore, because I'm doing what I'm gonna do.
Good.
Love, and maybe sometimes it's like embarrassing when you're face to face with someone, like telling them like, you know, because I feel like romance is especially vulnerable, because you kind of feel like anytime you share your personal work of any sort, it feels vulnerable. But I feel like romance is especially fraught in that way, so it can sometimes still get you. But when I'm like just by myself, right, I'm like, yeah, this shit rules.
Yeah.
This is the best.
We love it. We love it.
Yeah, my approach to it is, I guess, kind of divided, because I do a webcomic that's sort of celebrating / making fun of old romance comics. So I do kind of lean into the overwrought, you know, super dramatic feel of those old 60s and 70s romance comics. So that way, you know, I do kind of lean into the silliness, but then for my own, you know, sort of a little more serious work, it's always a little bit comedic, but I do, I really do like to have that play of subverting kind of what we expect from a romance. I do find that romance does get maybe an unfair rap, because that is always an element that you know, say we're adapting a comic book or something, even mainstream comics like superhero books, like they'll tend to beef up that element in the movie version, and audiences like it. So
yeah, because romance is a part of all of our lives, and superheroes are not, technically.
Exactly. It's, in some ways, it's the most
bothers me.
Exactly.
Maybe in your life.
I don't want to, but and that is probably the most relatable element to these.
Because people want to see the human element, and that is romance.
Yeah. Kathleen, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't ever think about the audience that much when I'm writing anything.
It's all about me.
Other than just wanting to take people for like a good time. You know, so I'm kind of just writing like what I want to see out there. Like I think, especially in North America, like romance comics aimed at adults, there is a huge audience there, and the publishers don't necessarily realize it yet. So I just want to see more of it. So that's what I'm doing. And I think we're also like entering an interesting time where I think romance, some of the stigma is dropping away a little bit, because I think there's more of like a culture, especially online, of like romance gets kind of a little trash talked, because it is something that a lot of women and young women are very into, which is always an interest that the culture is like, about. But there's more avenues online for like people to be talking about this and like sharing their passions. So I feel like some of the stigma of that stuff is sort of like dropping away a little bit, which is exciting. And it's easier to find the people who are into it. So yeah.
And then unfortunately, I think it's also like, as that's changing, I mean, you mentioned the adult audience, and the word adult is a strange thing, because then people think nowadays, with the success of certain kinds of romance, people automatically assume it's adult, right? Like that romance, you know, and romance and
as the double talk on TikTok, would you have you say spicy?
Yeah,
exactly.
And I love
you
it
can
all.
just say words. You
all
know,
should exist, but we do lack the vocabulary to talk about this, because one of my challenges is I primarily write for children, and I do like my books do sort of focus on a little bit of like crushes and the beginning of relationships. So it's not romance in the traditional like finding the beats you have to hit for it to be within this certain genre. But then I also have my work for adults. I Hated You in High School, which came out this year. And I'm navigating having those works on the table together, because I Hated You in High School is essentially PG-13 rating, but I want to make sure that my parents who are shopping for their 8-year-old are not picking up that book, because their 8-year-old is maybe not ready for it yet, because it is written with adults in mind. But then if I have 4 adults on the book, people go, oh, what am I getting into? So I've now tacked on PG-13, and I think that's helping.
English is a very like difficult language to.
Yeah, the vocabulary to talk about the nuances in a bite-sized way.
Well, because like in manga, you have shoujo, which is usually for girls. You have josei, which is for like older women. You know, you have seinen, which is like not quite romance, but there is romance involved, and you know, that kind of thing. And I just feel like English is so limited in what we can say. Because if you say adult, people are like, oy, oy, oy.
I'm like, no, I just the protagonist's 25 and dealing
this is just what adults are like.
Well, and the themes are a little bit more mature, right? I mean, I having read that book and loved it, but like the themes are a bit more mature, and then it's not even necessarily the spicy components of it. But I mean, just for an 8-year-old to pick up a book that's maybe a little bit more mature meant written with adults in mind or written even with teenagers in mind, the emotions there might be a little bit too complex for them to even understand.
It's true. I did read a Piers Anthony book at 8, and I don't think I quite understood what was happening there. I was like, I'm not interested in this, and I can't tell you why until 20 years from now.
Yeah. So I think an important element, obviously, of any story, but especially in romance, is having that great lead character or lead couple. So I'm wondering how you go into, when you're creating a new work, how do you go into crafting those characters? Maybe Kathleen, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I feel like characters come to me like generally fairly fully formed. Like I think I start with like the concept of what's the story that I want to tell, and then the characters kind of like come along with that. So like I Hated You in high school. I wrote that book. It started off as a short story that I wrote because I watched every bad Christmas romance on Netflix one year, and I was like, all of these are straight. I can write a queer one, and I can write it better. And so I wrote a short story, and then my agent a couple of years later was like, I think we could make this a graphic novel. And I was like, yeah. But like romance, like the Christmas Hallmark romance movies have a very set archetype of who the main character is, and that did not speak to me as like a 25-year-old at the time when I like wrote the original first story. Like it just, I don't know, it's too polished. So Tessa, who's the protagonist, is a lot more messy, and things are just really not working out for her in the way that she had hoped at 25. And that sort of helped guide the rest of the story once I figured that out. So it's very much in response to a certain type of media and a certain type of archetypal character that I don't think speaks to the nuances of characters and humanity, which is what I was more going for with the work. Yeah.
Awesome. Don, how about you?
Well, mine's a little trickier because most of my, romantic narrative stories have been autobio. So I'm the main character, and but even so, it's still a story and it's still character, and you're still deciding what you want to reveal and what you want to focus on. And so the trick for me has been to sort of just be as honest as I can, to not. The last thing you want is to be overly concerned with the audience liking you. You just sort of have to tell the story exactly, not exactly how it happened, but because you do want it to be as dramatic as possible, but you also don't want to, you don't want to sugarcoat yourself. And so I think I relate a lot to what you were saying about, having a flawed protagonist. I am deeply flawed, and I am deeply aware of it. And so that's, going to guide the. So as soon as I start to feel embarrassed or like I should pull back, that's when I know I'm getting to the good stuff.
Awesome. Go for it, Autumn.
For me, I think I know for sure that I personally do gravitate to a certain type of character, a certain type of style of character. So oftentimes I do sort of have like my normal beats that I follow when I create. Like I usually start with I don't know, I feel like I go a little backwards. Like I'll create a character just like visually, like I'll sketch something out and be like, maybe I'll do something with this person. And oftentimes if I'm like, oh wait, like this is too much like my last character, I'll start switching things up. I'll like be like, okay, like if I like this person like that, I'm gonna go and just do the complete opposite to remember to switch up like how my characters are, because I do kind of like, that like kind-hearted, patient protagonist sort of thing. And then I remember that's not very fun all the time, so I have to add a little more intrigue in there, a little more extra. But yeah, usually I start with like the visuals first, and then everything kind of piles on from there.
Awesome. With that, in terms of with creating a character, so we've got our character, looking at the story, a lot of romance, comics, movies, shows, I don't want to say always, but a lot of the time it focuses on getting the two main characters together. But what I'm curious about is the afterwards. So do you maybe have any tips or thoughts on writing a story that's not necessarily the journey towards the character getting together, but after the two characters get together?
I do have a complaint about that.
Well, let's start there.
I think, because I agree with you. I am personally, like when I'm reading, I do like a getting together storyline and not so much like an established relationship storyline. However, nothing is worse than watching a TV show where they get the established characters together and writers don't know how to write them together after that. So there's a bunch of like contrived breakups. I think that's so uninteresting. I think if we're going to do something established and you want to have like a regular amount of like, I don't know, drama, there's like regular relationship issues that can add to drama. Like things outside of their control can add drama. You don't have to have them make up and break up over and over again, because then it just ruins the whole thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right? I agree with that. Don, what do you think?
I agree completely. Just about the narratives we see that there seems to be nothing more boring to TV writers or than people who get together and as somebody who has found a great partner, I find that very insulting, because that's where the adventure kind of begins, and it's not about that the relationship guy drives the problems. It's that you can solve problems in a relationship. But bringing it back to my work, none of my stories have had happy endings, because my genre so far is doomed romance. So I do put that very big on the placard, so that people know going in, like, you're not going to enjoy the ending to the story. but you can enjoy the ending, hopefully, because it isn't always about just getting together and coupling. It's about what did you learn, and what can you improve on, and who did you become, and who did you help this person become. So there are I hope satisfying stories to be told, even when they're not together.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Kathleen, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think if I actually have anything to add here to this, because I don't know. I'm like very gay, and I really like the longing.
So true.
Characters trying to figure out how to speak to each other, like figure out those beginning feelings. So those are kind of where like I live with the stories that I'm currently interested in telling. I mean, I'm certainly interested in reading more stuff that goes beyond that, because it is true, like, life is not just about beginnings, it's about continuations, and figuring out what happens in there, and how like relationships change and shift. But I don't know, as a writer, it's just so fun to write characters yearning.
I know, the first blush of romance is really where it's at.
Yes, I agree with that. And that's an interesting point, Kathleen, that you made, that in a lot of queer books, I think an important part to touch on is that longing, and even just figuring out the part before you're even getting to the plot of I want to be with this person, is figuring out, I'm attracted to this person of this, the same gender or the opposite gender, or
even if it's not a coming out story, there's still that
there's still that element of
just like, is this person like, however you're writing it, usually there's like an element of like, is this person also like me, and will they like me the way I like, anyway. But,
it's really interesting. So maybe, Kathleen, do you want to delve into that a little bit further? I know this is a romance, but that's an element of romance. And just how you work through writing characters facing those internal and external struggles.
I think... Sorry, let me... We're at like the point of the afternoon where my brain's melting a little bit, so I'll like try to be eloquent, but like hopefully it'll come out okay. I don't know. I think it's just like fun. I think it comes from a bit of my own personality of like, I grew up just like always having crushes that like never went anywhere. Like I didn't date until I was an adult. So like just like drawing on those experiences a little bit, and very much like trying to make the fiction feel more grounded through those like real experiences. It's like, what's fun for me? Because like none of I Hated You in high school. My greatest fear when this book came out, because it is about a young woman who lives in Vancouver, who is from Ontario, and is a cartoonist. And if you just say that sentence, that does describe me. And my greatest fear was that people were going to think I was talking about like somebody real. And there were a couple people.
Or worse, they think it's about them, and you're like, oh,
no. I had to like just call a couple people before the book came out and be like, just so you know, like this isn't about you. Just so you know, because there's a couple details that I pulled that are like from real life, and I just had to be like, I borrowed this detail because it's interesting flavor, but I'm not trying to speak about you in any way. And they're like, it's just easier to clarify that before the book comes out. And then instead of them reading it and then asking me. But I'm always sort of thinking
Damage
about
control.
my own emotions and how those can translate onto a character who is very much not me. But in trying to make this like formulaic story a little less formulaic and feel more like real and grounded with the characters, I was pulling on sort of like real emotions. Like it's very much about like what happens when you graduate art school and nothing's working art-wise. Like your career just isn't going anywhere and you don't know how to make it go anywhere. And that feeling of dissatisfaction and like aimlessness that I think comes in your like mid-20s.
Autumn, what about you? On the topic of just the like before the figuring out
the longing, the yearning,
the longing and the pining and the confusion.
I love it. I love to opine. I love to have like long drawn out, like just so just so dramatic. I don't know. I think I like that like sort of flowery. Maybe it's because I read a lot of like Harlequins as like a little kid, or like, do you guys remember Lurleen McDaniels? Are you too young for that? Some of you?
I remember it.
It's basically they're like paperbacks before young adult fiction became popular about like girls who were always going to die. They had cancer, but they were also in love. So I feel like that baked something in there. But yeah, I agree with Kathleen. I feel like there is that like the part where you're leaning into like the yearning, or like, I know people have complicated feelings about miscommunication as a trope, but I do feel like miscommunication in the general sense is like just a part of life. And when I'm like writing the beats out for my story, or when I'm trying to figure out what I want to do, like there are just like certain miscommunications in the sense that like two different people having two different sets of life experiences, and that is just, it's not like, oh, they misheard something or this or that. It's like, this person likes that person, and maybe they like the other person back, but just because of like the vastly different life experiences or like self-esteem issues, that kind of thing, you're just kind of like leaning into that and being like, this is why there's miscommunication, and this is why it's going to feel so earned at the end when they actually do get together.
Yeah, absolutely. Don, did you want to add anything there?
Definitely. I do relate a lot to, I mean, longing is a huge theme in all my work. And so I really feel like you really have hit on something very universal that, I mean, I don't have the queer experience, obviously, but that that feeling of unbelonging, or that feeling of, oh, this person paying me attention will solve all these problems or these different things, are certainly universal elements, and I think things that everybody can relate to. I remember when I was growing up, I loved the music of the Smiths and Morrissey, not realizing, again, the queer connection, but just his sense of alienation was like, oh, it's like he's speaking to me, even though it was obviously a very different thing he was relating to. Going back to your concerns about autobio and having to reach out to people, I actually did have to reach out to somebody that I wrote about and hadn't spoken to for 20 years. In my comic Waiting for Wednesday, I don't want to spoil it for all you people who are going to go buy it right after this, but the story is of the crush that I'm about to ask out. The day I'm going to ask her out, it is announced her family won the lottery. And this is a real thing that happened to me. And yeah, which is like, what do? Do you still ask her out? And then of course, anyway, it's a whole thing.
She'll pay for the date now.
It's a great story. But when I showed it to my friends, they weren't like, yeah, we know who this is. You're gonna have to get this okayed by her. Maybe not legally, but morally.
Yeah. Morally for sure,
And so I had to make the weirdest phone call ever, because she had moved to a different province, and I was like, hey, funny thing, I know we haven't talked in 20 years, but...
How's your lottery winnings, by the way?
I had a crush on you. I was going to ask you out, and I didn't. And I wrote a comic about it, and the comic's coming out. So, but she couldn't have been more wonderful about it, and is a big booster for the book. And so I put it out with confidence of her approval. But it's really dicey. It's really awkward.
I feel like for a lot of people, if you come at it from like a general like kind point of view, and also for her, it's probably like a little bit of an ego boost that you had like a nice memory instead of like a sad memory. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was certainly a more embarrassing. I mean, she comes off great. The story's only embarrassing through me. So.
That's amazing. I feel like that story, having to call up somebody 20 years later, could be a romance comic in itself, right? Yeah. So on the topic,
We're going back to our small town.
exactly.
Hello.
Yes, that is a this is actually just an advert for a Hallmark movie that's coming out. Yeah. So on the topic of autobio comics, I think Kathleen, you'd posted something or shared something on Instagram a couple months ago about, I need to make sure like not using all of my traumas in one book, right? That Onion article.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So how, when you're working on a book, as we all have, how do you decide how much of yourself to put into it, and how to decide what pieces of, not necessarily trauma, but trauma, to put into your books, and what to maybe hold back? Maybe Kathleen? you wanna start?
Yeah. Oh man, I forgot I posted about that. Yeah, there's like a funny Onion article, but yeah, I think I was like, I'm pacing myself, or trying to, anyways. Because I know I've had in the past like intentional thoughts with the kids' books that I write. Like each of them has, certain elements of my own life as inspiration in some way, and being like, I'm gonna save this one thing for later instead of using it now or whatever. But yeah, I think it's just, you just go by feel. Because also there's certain things where I'm like, I think there are certain topics I would really like to touch on someday, but currently they're too close to where I'm at in my life, or like I don't feel like I have enough distance from the thing that's happening to be able to speak to it in a meaningful way in fiction, because I don't do autobiographical work anymore. I used to when I was younger, when I was fine with having no boundaries with the audience.
Too real.
And now I'm old and I like being a hermit. But I also find it's more easy to maybe speak honestly when things are fictionalized, and maybe to speak with more distance and nuance when things are fictionalized, to work through things that have happened. But yeah, I think it's really by feel. Usually every book has like one or two things where I'm like I Hated You in High School is very much about when I was in my 20s. And feeling really lost and like a failure, even though things were kind of working out for me in many ways. But specifically, just feeling like dating stuff was complicated and career stuff was complicated. So where was I getting my wins? And now I'm older, and the next book I want to write, if I can pitch another adult graphic novel, is going to deal with different themes because I'm in a different place of life. But yeah. Always hoping that life will progress and I'll find new things I want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually have
Go for it, Autumn.
something, but I also similarly, like I have never really done autobio comics, but I also have put a lot of my own personal like life things that have happened to me into my work. And one specific, like it's not anywhere yet, obviously, but something I've been working on for like a couple years is like there are certain things that came to me, and I was working on this comic during like COVID lockdown, like the first time, and I was writing it down, I was like, oh shit, this is actually, because in the moment, because I am so super literate about things, and like so like I don't always look through into what I actually mean sometimes. And then I was looking at it, I was like, oh shit, this is about like my rocky like road to ADHD diagnosis and feeling like a super adult failure. And I was like reading through it, I was like, oh, okay. This is why I feel sad.
Yeah.
So there are certain things, and like obviously you can like keep yourself apart from it slightly, but when I was working on this one character and all of like their little messy things and this and that, I was like, oh yes, okay, this is a very obvious like, not even, I don't know if it's called a metaphor, but like I was like, oh yes, okay, this is me grappling with some of the things that happened in my life, but through like a romance comic.
No, absolutely. I mean, all the main characters in my books, they're me.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah. Even if they're not, they are.
Me when I'm a boy, me when I'm a monster, me when I...
yeah, exactly. Dawn, what about you? I feel like this is your wheelhouse. You do the autobio stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I have similar feelings to what Kathleen was saying about that needing that distance. So far, I mean, I've had an advantage that all my stories have been about 20 years ago. So I've got that change in perspective. It doesn't even really feel like me. I mean, everybody changes so much over time.
Oh yeah.
And then plus I can add sort of that extra sort of Wonder Years-esque kind of wrinkle of like kind of making fun of the way that I was, going like, look, I know how this looks. So and that commentary kind of, I think, adds a lot of the comedy to the story. But in terms of what to leave in and what to leave out, that is still a bit of a dance, because my policy tends to be, if it embarrasses me, then it stays. But if it hurts somebody close to me, then I've got to really think about that. And I think and that's, I'm not always perfect with it. I think that perhaps the drama of my stories suffer, maybe protecting certain family elements or different things that just I don't want to see in print, or at least not right now. And so, but at the same time, it's hopefully you get the perspective.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that idea of if it embarrasses me, great. But if maybe it's someone else, maybe I need to think about that. I think that's generally it's a good rule. Yeah, I think so. I haven't heard it put so succinctly like that, but that's great. Okay, we have about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure that we've covered everything that you guys want to cover before we open it up for some questions. Oh, yes. Thank you for the reminder. Let's talk a little bit about the parallels between horror and romance.
Yes.
You can kick that off,
Yeah.
Adam.
I was just saying yesterday, I think like horror especially, but sometimes people don't think about this with romance, is how they reflect our social anxieties and like interests at the time. So horror right now, there's a lot of like body horror happening, but there's also less zombies and more like an obvious kind of like reflection on women's rights and like how we're living now under fascism. And whereas you can tell with the romance sphere with what's popular, I think, is obviously it's not 100% because there's so many people in the world, but from what I'm seeing on like, because I'm kind of like tuned into what people are talking about on like TikTok and stuff about books, is there's two main categories, which is so interesting because they're so far from each other, but they make so much sense, is like cozy fantasy with no real problems and nothing ever happens, or dark romance where someone gets kidnapped by a mafioso and like is just like had their way with them until they decide that they love that person kind of thing. And so there's those two pendulums that keep swinging back and forth. And I think it's really interesting because as you may or may not know, in terms of like romantic history with like how a lot of older romance books are like women kind of being taken by barbarians and things like that, because women weren't allowed to out loud say, oh, I actually want that. So a lot of like assault storylines are because of they can get away with it without being like slut shamed basically. And I think that's kind of happening again with dark romance, but then on the other side, cozy romance, which is kind of a reaction to the idea of sexuality and hating what's happening in the mainstream culture. And that's my current theories about that.
That's fascinating. Go for it, Don.
I don't have a giant strong opinion on horror, but I do. Part of what I want to do with romance comics, and just bringing it back into the fore, is that in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, there were more comics than just capes. And I love superheroes. I
think it's because both men and women cared about romance at the time.
Well, that's true. But I mean, so the other genres were romance, horror, war, cowboy.
Noir.
These were all comics that were just as popular as Captain Marvel or Superman or whatever. So I can't really speak to the horror versus romance thing, but I think that a rising tide lifts many boats. So any kind of genre that isn't superheroes, and again, I love superheroes. Let me write Superman. But I do think that just makes comics as a world a lot more interesting.
I guess the only thing I have to say about horror and romance is they're both about tension, and you want, as a writer, to have the ending feel earned for both of them. Because there's nothing worse than watching a horror movie or reading a horror book and it just falls apart at the end and you're like, you answer too many questions. It feels like, you know, whatever.
This is
Garbagey.
CinemaSin's fault.
And same with like reading a romance where like you want it to feel earned by the time that the characters get together, and you feel like, oh, finally, like this feels meaningful and like really enjoyable the way it's all coming together, instead of like two little puppets on popsicle sticks, you
If
know,
I could
just
write
going where they
yeah.
need to go. So yeah, they're both about tension and finding a way to get that like climactic moment in the story feeling earned, which I guess maybe is all fiction, but that's what I think about with those two.
If I could
genres.
write one thing that gave
Yeah.
anyone the same reaction as watching Harry Met Sally for the first time or Moonstruck for the first time, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want.
Yes, absolutely. Is there anything else of the group here that we wanted to make sure we touched on?
Do we want to talk about like publication at all, or like self-publishing versus trad publishing?
Yeah, we could chat about it a little bit. I think a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, I guess my background is like I publish through traditional publishers, like traditional book publishers that are like going out into like graphic novel imprints and stuff. So that's maybe a different experience than if folks here, I think, I know Autumn, you're self-publishing. Don, I'm not as familiar. Like,
True.
if you want to talk about the experience, like getting that out in front of people, or if anyone wants to hear about like pitching, what that's like, happy to talk about
They
that.
did do a separate one to shout out for the recording.
Oh,
they did do a
sweet.
separate one about
Okay.
pitching. So there will be
Excellent.
a lot of information, I'm sure, in that one.
Yeah.
But yes, just
I
Autumn,
think-
go for it.
Especially with romance, I feel like self-publishing kind of is the way sometimes, because I'm not saying I do a lot of not safe for work stuff, but it is harder to pitch that kind of thing. So as you can probably see with like the rise of like Kickstarter anthologies and stuff like that, it is a lot easier if you're wanting a certain type of like rated R and above site romance, self-publishing, or like just putting it online. And it is getting harder to do that because of on account of the everything happening in the world, but it is still possible. And yeah, I usually, like, for me, I self-publish my own like short comic Crybaby, and it's based very heavily on my memories and memories, like I'm not doing this every other week, but like of reading like a one-shot BL manga at like the store and being like, this rules, and having those little like the short comic at the end and all that stuff. So I took that like really like sensory heavy experience of like just being like, wow, this is awesome. And doing my own sort of one shot based on those feelings. And I think, would it be nice if I could like send that out to be self-published? Yes, but I do think it is a niche enough, especially it's so heavily, because I'm so heavily influenced by like Japanese or like other more like international comics. I feel like it is easier sometimes just to like DIY it yourself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my feelings are similar, just with how personal my stories are and wanting to sort of keep total control of them. And then also, I mean, I love publishers, I love publishing, and I do understand they have a difficult job of, they really have to be pretty nakedly like, this is why I can't market this.
Yeah.
And I've had publishers be very upfront about that. And so I want to be able to tell the most boring story that I can find. and if that's not marketable, that's fine. I have these experiences, and
one man's boring is another man's treasure. You know what I love? Paperwork movies. Those are great, and they're actually not boring.
Amazing. All right. Should we open it up for some audience questions if there are any?
Yeah, self-explanatory. Romance is what makes the world go round.
It's true. It's true.
You know, it's all about the human condition.
Yep. Nothing. I know. It's the end of the day. I
It's
think this is
true,
the
it's
last
true.
panel, so we're all tired. Awesome. Okay, we'll go once, go twice. All right. Well, any final thoughts? Maybe let's end it on something fun. What's everybody's favorite trope? Mine is just
man.
one bed.
Oh man. Okay, you guys first.
Oh no,
I love them all.
to think about this. Yeah, I do just love a trope in general. Yeah, just one bed is always really good.
So good. It's so good.
Yeah, I think that's pretty up there for me.
I don't know if this is a trope per se, but there's this thing. Okay, I've been reading fan fiction, all that stuff for a long time. in fan fiction, there's usually a moment where a character goes, oh, and then says, oh, in italics.
Oh,
That shit
I
rules.
I saw a sticker of that at a con I did earlier this year where it was the O and then the
You know,
O.
they're suddenly like, oh no, I love him. And I'm like, yes, yes.
Yes, yes, I agree. I love that moment in fic.
The good
Best.
stuff.
That's
Yeah.
the best moment. Yeah, yeah.
And mine is, of course, completely unrelatable because it's from these old romance comics. Again, Young Brides is my favorite. If you ever find an archive of it, it's
I
hilarious.
did read one of those when I was a kid.
And The Mother-in-Law. You wouldn't believe how large the mother-in-law looms in this
funny.
fiction, and it's like
love
so,
that.
which is very. I mean, it shows you. It kind of shows why my work basing off that is so unpopular because it's such a weird, unrelatable thing. But
I feel like
anyway.
it's not. Every
Yeah.
girl I've ever known who's gotten married has been like, you know what sucks about a mother-in-law? Everything. Like,
Shout out to my mother-in-law.
Yeah,
She's
shout
watching
out.
this. I love you.
so true. No, I'm sure some are great. My mom's mother-in-law was great because she never lived in Canada. So
There you go. There's a zero chance that my mother-in-law is watching this, but I am blessed with a very nice mother-in-law.
yeah. That's so funny. Mother-in-law trope.
Right? The mother-in-law trope. I love it.
Also, friends to lovers.
Friends to lovers is great. Enemies to lovers is great.
Yeah.
Lovers to enemies is also great.
Yeah. Or what is it? Friends to enemies to friends to lovers.
Yes. So good. So good. Awesome.
It's all good. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kathleen, Don, Autumn, for going on this journey with all of us.
So great.
Thank you to PCF, of course, for hosting all these amazing panels and artists. And I believe our marketplace is still open until 5. So
It is.
definitely come back
If you're
upstairs and hang
interested
out.
in reading Crybaby, come on down.
Hell yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody.